Thanks everyone for dealing with us, taking a little bit of a lighter load here the next couple weeks. But pretty soon we'll be back in the full gear here.
There's a famous Rich Kotite story after they lost to the 49ers. They were losing every game, but they go out to San Francisco, play the 49ers, and it was close. They played really well, but they still lost. And Kotite comes after the game and he goes, "We're back." And we're like, "You lost the game." But he turned out to be right because they won like their next five. But whenever somebody says we're back, I think of Kotite, Candlestick Park. We're back.
So this is like a good "we're back" story because we're not really back. We're still on a light week, but next week we'll really be back.
We will be back. And I'll tell you what, next week stuff's going to start coming fast and furious with, the combine and then free agency. And it's going to be a very busy March. Combine's late this year. So things are going to really kick into gear very quickly once we do come back.
That's true. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We have some stuff to talk about today, even though we're doing one a week. This is our second 1 week podcast, and then next week I'll be at the combine. We'll get two in. But we have some stuff to talk about. We want to look at NFL.com published a quarterback rankings from the 2021 season. We want to see where Jalen Hurts ranked and if we agree with that spot. We want to go through a preview of free agency a little bit and just pick a couple positions we think the Eagles might want to target. We'll look ahead to the combine and we'll look back at some previous combines. And then at the end, I wanted to tell everyone about my trip a little bit. So if you don't care about that, I'll let you know when to go. We'll tell you when to go ahead and shut it down.
Can I just sign off?
You can sign off too at that point. But we want to start with that quarterback list. It's good work from Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com. Ranked every quarterback in the league, not just the starters, but everyone who played. And it's actually a ranking of how they played in 2021. So he makes that very clear that it's not just a ranking of these players, but it's specifically how they played in 2021. And Rube, I made the mistake. I looked at the list before, like thinking about it in my head, because I'm not sure where I would have put Hurts, like off the top of my head without thinking too much into it. But this is a little higher than I think I would have said, but I agree with her where he put him. He put him at 17.
Yeah, and these lists are really hard to do. Like, it seems like it would be easy, just rank the quarterbacks, but they're hard to do. And I think it's important that he kind of sets the ground rules. This is how they played last year. This isn't a projection of who I'd want to build a team with or anything like that. I would still have Pat Mahomes in my top five, even though obviously he didn't finish the season on a high note. But yeah, it's interesting. I was a little surprised how high Jalen was, but it does make sense. I do think there's a tendency. I think people around the league look at Jalen a little differently than we all do. I mean, I think we're all in that has he done enough mode, But when you kind of step back from the outside and look at what he did as a 23-year-old, getting a team to the playoffs and playing fairly well for the most part, I can see where he would put him 17th. It does, he does back it up.
Yeah, and if you start to look at the players below him, I had this tendency, I wanted to look at it and be like, well, this guy should be ahead of him, or this guy. There weren't. I mean, if you look at his list, he has Hurts at 17, Teddy Bridgewater at 18, not putting Bridgewater ahead of him. Guy in Indy at 19, not putting him ahead of him. Jimmy Garoppolo at 20. I guess you can make a case. I wouldn't. Jameis Winston at 21, Tua at 22, Jared Goff at 23, Daniel Jones 24, Baker Mayfield 25, Tyler Huntley at 26. So we're really starting to drop off here. You have to agree with it. I mean, and then you start to say, well, would you put him higher than anyone above him? Let me go from 10 down, Reuben. You tell me if you'd put Hurts above any of these players, okay? 10, Derek Carr.
No.
11, Russell Wilson.
No.
12, Ryan Tannehill.
Tannehill did throw 17 interceptions this year.
Just 22 touchdowns.
Yeah. I was surprised Tannehill was so high. That was one guy I questioned. I might I might consider putting Hurts ahead of Tannehill.
Kirk Cousins at 13.
No.
Lamar Jackson at 14.
Lamar Jackson didn't have a very good year.
Missed some time with injury.
Missed some time. I'd probably still have Lamar ahead of him.
Yeah. He's still a better version of Jalen. So it's tough to.
Yeah, I mean, he threw more picks. I think the touchdowns were the same. Jalen had 10 rushing touchdowns. Lamar had 2. They rushed for about the same number of yards. You can make a case for putting Jalen ahead of Lamar Jackson,
You could, especially with this criteria. Matt Ryan at 15.
Yeah, actually, probably not. But yeah, I'm just not the world's biggest Matt Ryan fan. But at this point in his career, but I guess Matt Ryan would be ahead of him still.
And then Mac Jones at 16.
I'd probably have him a bit ahead of Jalen.
Okay. So we pretty much agree with exactly where he put him.
I mean, you can make a case for Lamar and Tannehill. You can make a case for him being a size 15, probably. I wouldn't drop him any lower. There's nobody. I mean, maybe Garoppolo. I'm not a big Garoppolo fan, so I don't think I would do that. But I think 15 to 17 does seem to be kind of where he belongs.
Yeah, it's funny. I came back from vacation and I heard all this like Garoppolo stuff. I'm like, Eagles. Was there a report? And it wasn't a report. It was like it was basically, I think it was Albert Breer wrote like the Eagles are one of the teams that could be in a quarterback market when he was explaining. And then it like people took it from there as like the Eagles were interested in Garoppolo. That wouldn't make any sense.
Some blog, I've never heard of it, took Breer. It was at the end of a notes column that Breer wrote, and Breer just threw a name. He's just throwing names out there, which we all do. And the website said Eagles expected to pursue Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm and I'm sure they got 1 billion page views, but you can't do that. I mean, you can't just invent a story. That's not what Breer said. It's not what he wrote. And then I'm getting all these tweets, I can't believe that's so disrespectful to Jalen. I can't believe they're doing this to Jalen. Who doing what? They're not doing anything. Garoppolo's not coming here. So, that was a little, I guess this is, in this day and age, anything goes when it comes to some of these websites.
It was funny because I started seeing stuff. I wasn't really on my phone the last week. And then this morning, I'm like looking through stuff and I'm like, where did this, I'm trying to like track it. I eventually figured out what happened. Adam Herman on our site wrote about it, like explaining it helped me out. Cause I was like, what the heck's going on here? But yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah. Would you put Garoppolo ahead of Hurts or behind him?
I think I'd leave it the way it was with Hurts ahead of him.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing, though, because like we agree with where Jalen is, but I think we also agree that like it's probably not good enough.
Yeah, well, there's no question. I mean, because you're not going to win a Super Bowl with the 17th best quarterback unless you have like a historic defense. So I would say he's got to be in the top 10 next year. I mean, he does. He just has to be there or they're going to replace him.
Yeah, it feels like to me, it's like the biggest fear with a quarterback is that you end up in this middle ground where, yeah, they're good, but are they going to be great? Or are you stuck in this pattern where you're going, well, maybe it'll be a little better next year, a little better. He has the tools. And it's like, Kirk Cousins. Is Kirk Cousins ever going to be he'll put up some numbers and he'll do good things. He's a good quarterback. But like, is he ever going to be an elite quarterback?
I mean, he's always going to put up. I mean, we said that about, Matt Stafford. I mean, he was kind of Kirk Cousins, always putting up good numbers for bad teams. I guess if you put Kirk Cousins on a great team, I think you could probably win with him. But I also think the difference is that Jalen's 23. And, if you're going to have a quarterback you're not sure about, have one who's 23 and has gotten better each year, and has the work ethic to get better and to keep improving, who understands where he needs to get better. And he's got a chance to get to that point. And if he doesn't, then he's not your quarterback anymore. But I'd rather, if you're going to have a guy who's not in the top 10, I'd rather have a 23-year-old than a, 29, 30, 31-year-old that what he is what he is. So and look, the way Jalen takes, as seriously as he takes all this, and his work ethic and his will and determination to get better, I don't know how much better he can get, but I know he'll get to wherever he can get to just because of his determination and work ethic, and he's going to put in the work. So whether he can get to the top 10, I don't know, but I know he'll do everything he can, and it's up to the Eagles to surround him with enough weapons to facilitate that. So he's not a Matt Stafford, who is a Super Bowl champion that we don't even know can be that good because of what's around him. So that's probably a bad comparison, just because their problem wasn't really weapons. It was defense, and it was everything. But I still haven't given up on the kid, and obviously next year is the pivotal year. I think it's just so different when you take a guy in the second round. If they taken Hurts in the first round, these aren't questions. You're committed to the guy for a few years. Although lately, teams are changing quarterbacks a lot quicker than they used to. But I think as a second round pick, you're just always going to have, because the team's not financially as obligated as they are, if the guy's a first round pick.
Yeah, and if he was a first round pick, he probably wouldn't have had the, I don't want to say deficiencies. That seems harsh, but he'd be a better player. He'd be a better prospect, you know what I mean? So there'd be more, not necessarily a better player, but he'd be a better prospect.
Yeah, but if Jalen Hurts was a first round pick and had the exact same season he had this past year, I think the expectation would be that he would get better. Well, he's a first round pick; he'll get better. Trevor Lawrence's first year as a starter. He was a rookie, but people look at him like, well, he's going to get better.
Yeah,
and he's the same age as Jalen, and they had started about the same number of games. I don't know. I think everyone's like, nobody's talking about replacing Trevor Lawrence. So they have a new coach. I think he'll do well with them. But I just think everyone looks at non-first round quarterbacks differently. There's just a different expectation. And
yeah, my point isn't that it's just the round. It's the evaluation of the player that led to him being that round pick too.
Yeah,
it's not like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I generally agree with you, and I'm really curious to see. In the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm kind of rooting for them to give him this year. I want to see it. I want to see what he can do. I don't know what he can do, but there's still the lingering thought in the back of my mind that Howie likes Jalen Hurts, but he's going to continue to look elsewhere. Do you feel that way too? That like he's.
Yeah, I do.
They do like Jalen. They wouldn't have drafted him. They didn't like him, but we know the way they think about the position.
Yeah, I think it's a tug of war. I'm sure that Howie also has this historic opportunity with 3 top 20 picks that teams don't get, and it's a chance for Howie to be Howie and really cut loose and maybe not stay at the 3 spots he's at, but start moving around and doing some different things. I just don't think he. Unless it's Russell Wilson and unless the price is reasonable, I just don't see him willing and dealing for a quarterback. I don't think they're going to bring Deshaun Watson in unless everything is resolved, which I don't think it's going to be. And Aaron Rodgers is either going to retire or be a Packer. I just don't see him at this point coming here. And I don't know who else there is. I don't know who else could possibly make sense for the team that he's on and for the Eagles. There's just not that many veteran guys out there who are going to be moving. So
I'm with you. And it would have to, for me to do it, it would have to be an elite player. You wouldn't possibly wreck the locker room for, Jimmy Garoppolo. Why would you do it?
Okay. That's a lateral move. Yeah, you're not going to give something up for
even if it's like, you could argue if I'm not arguing this, but you could argue it's like a slight incline. But even if it is, what's the
and he's a lot older. What's Garoppolo, 29 or 30?
Yeah. So
we could go through the top 10 guys on here and like very few of them make sense. I mean, Kyler Murray, I don't think. I mean, he's really
Well, that's an
talented.
interesting one. He's, he disgruntled a little bit. It seems like there's some turmoil in that building with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the turmoil is he wants a new contract. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I would probably stay away. I mean, the way this season ended, I don't know. Let me look at his final numbers. I mean, he's obviously really talented. 24 touchdowns, 12 picks, 5 rushing touchdowns. So he had 29 touchdowns, 13 fumbles, threw for 4,000 yards, ran for 400. I mean, he's really good. But they just kept losing. You wonder about, what kind of leader is he? What kind of head of the franchise is this guy? Because it's not going well there. Yeah, I'm always aware of these guys at the first sign of trouble, they just things go really, really bad. And you can't underestimate the value of Jalen Hurts. I mean, these players love him, because of the way he plays and the way he works and the way he prepares, the way he practices. His teammates love this guy, and they'll go to the end of the world for him. And you can't underestimate the value of that. And you bring in another guy, and you that whole dynamic. Maybe the guy's better, maybe you win more games, but you got to really be careful of that dynamic changing.
Yeah, well, if the guy's better and you win more games, I wouldn't be too,
Well, I mean, potentially. I'm saying, if the guy on paper, you say, well, we can win 11 games instead of 9.
Yeah, it would have to be a big jump. I'm with you on that, and I'm also with you that like Russell Wilson's the one guy that makes you think it's on the table. It's going to be on the table if he's available. I think Howie's at least going to keep an eye on it.
I don't think he's going to be available, but
okay,
we'll see.
Yeah. All right, you want to move on to some free agency talk?
Yeah.
Eagles right now projected to have about 20 million in cap space, but you have to remember that they're going to have 3 first-round picks, so there's going to be significant money for draft picks, so it'll be less than that. But some positions, and we've talked about receiver quite a bit, and we can mention it again. We're both in agreement that if you're looking at a position the Eagles should add to in free agency, receiver at the top of the list, and we talked about Devontae Smith wanting that as well. I think that's significant. And there are some good names out there, and we talked about them before, but would that still be at the top of your list for positions?
It'll still be at the top of my list, yes.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons that we've covered, but there's other positions as well that would make sense.
Yeah, how about so give me another one that if you're looking at it, you think, well, maybe they could add there.
Well, edge rusher is one that, I mean, they're going to have to, they might need 2. And I mean, we don't know when Brandon Graham will be ready. We don't know if he'll be ready. We don't know what they're going to get from him if he is ready. So I think, that's a position that they've got to address, maybe in multiple ways. Maybe a draft.
I've got I know the perfect player. I think he's 25, about to turn 26, former first-round pick, great ankle flexion and bend.
Underachieved with his first team.
Underachieved, really tough player.
Has played in the Super Bowl already.
Has played in the Super Bowl. Has some big moments under his belt. Would you want that guy on your team?
No. What do you have, 2 sacks this year? No, not for me. But somebody's going to pay Derek Barnett $10 million a year just based on traits.
It is funny though, because if that player's on another team, fans want him.
If you see the sack numbers and the quarterback hit numbers, I'm not sure you would.
Well, the QB hit numbers have always been good for him.
Yeah. Well, my guy is like Derek Barnett. He's a former Philadelphia player. I almost said Hassan Ridgeway, but Hassan Reddick is an interesting guy to me. He's a little older, but kind of a late bloomer. It was just kind of a matter of finding a position for him. Had the big last year in Arizona, and then goes to Carolina. He's got like 23.5 sacks the last 2 years. And he's a little undersized to be an edge rusher, but he's productive and he gets the quarterback. And I've always liked him. It was just a matter of kind of finding out how to use him. Teams tried to use him as a linebacker and he's been most productive as an edge rusher, and just getting to the quarterback, and just bring him in and be a third down edge rusher. And obviously a Temple guy, South Jersey guy, I believe, Haddon Heights. Is that right?
I think so.
Haddon Heights. So that's my guy. I think you could. I don't know if he grew up. I don't know if you get a little hometown discount because he's from here, but I don't think the price will be astronomical because of his age. He's a little older, but he'd be at the top of my list for. And there's some good edge rushers out there, but he'd be at the top of my list.
Yeah, he's an interesting one because he was really drafted as an off-ball linebacker, and then they were like, "No, you're an edge player," but he's not very big, so he's like he's been typecast a little bit, I guess, as like an outside linebacker or a 3-4 guy. But the Eagles could use a guy like that too. I mean, they've been multiple, so at least they seem to want to be multiple up front, and I'm sure Gannon could find a way to use him. I don't know about the price. Edge rushers get overpaid, and that's the problem with all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I got to pick one, so whoever it is going to get overpaid. But
would you be in on like a journeyman mercenary Jadeveon Clowney signing? Assuming they draft a guy and you can like plug another, you know what I mean? Plug a guy in for a year and hopefully the draft pick comes along.
Yeah. Probably not. I mean, I think he's a guy that would probably be less cost efficient than Reddick. And I just don't know where he is in his career. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of his. He's been a really good player. I'm gonna check his stats while you.
Okay, I can talk about him a little bit. I kind of like that he's a mercenary now. He's just going team to team year in, year out. I don't know if you can like build around a guy like that, but you can bring him in for a year, and he's a really good run stuffer too. Everyone talks about him as a pass rusher, and he's been okay as a pass rusher, but he's a solid player overall. He's never really lived up to being the first overall draft pick, but the injuries, I think, slowed him down early in his career, and he's probably not the player he once was. But I don't know. I think it's probably unlikely, but it's an interesting name out there, and it's going to be. We can talk about him every year. I think he's only going to sign 1-year deals, and we can talk about him each free agency.
Well, this will be his 5th team in 5 years, and I just don't think. I'm not sure he fits. I mean, yeah. I mean, they have signed some veterans to 1-year deals lately, but I think at this position, I'm not sure that's what's ideal.
Would you take a flyer on Dante Fowler? Just got released by the Falcons. Another undersized, kind of outside linebacker type.
Yeah,
but
probably
former first-round pick. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably not. But who is Clowney like at the top of your list?
No, it's the list isn't super great. I mean, there's some older players on here that I would kind of stay away from. Like JPP is on here, and Jerry Hughes is 33, 34 already. So the list isn't great, honestly, at edge rusher. So you got to figure it out from there.
Well, I figure if they draft a guy and have Sweat and BG, then this guy who's coming in doesn't have to be an every down player. He doesn't have to be the savior. You really just need a piece of the puzzle at edge rusher. Like when you're looking at a free agent wide receiver, I mean, you need a guy who can be, a WR2 and pretty close to being, to being number one, that good. You need a really high caliber guy. I think with the edge rusher, you really just need a piece of the puzzle. That's how, I mean, it's going to be expensive because just edge rushers are, but that's why I think Reddick's a good fit because, you don't need him to play every down. You don't need him to, because you're gonna be rotating BG in there anyway, if he's there. So I think that's what makes it a better fit. Just that you don't need a guy who can come in and get 15 sacks and be a Pro Bowl. You just need a guy who can help.
Yeah, I get that. How about I give you another position, safety, and we'll see what happens in free agency. Anthony Harris from their own free agents, Anthony Harris and Ryan McLeod are both set to be free agents. You and I are in agreement that maybe you bring back McLeod if the price is right, and he obviously wants to be here. So I would do that, but everyone talks about linebacker, and they haven't drafted a linebacker in the first round since 1979. I mean, they've never drafted a safety in the first round, and
Yep.
I don't see that changing. Maybe they draft one in on day 2 and they can bring them along, but it's a position where they don't really have a ton right now. They have their top 2 are free agents. They have Marcus Epps, who's been all right. They have Kayvon Wallace, who hasn't really played much. That's it.
Ben Smith was a first round pick and became a safety. He was
Does
a
not count.
corner when they drafted him. He was a corner, became a safety after his ACL. But yeah, they're not going to take one in the first round. There's not a lot of safeties get drafted in the first round anyway, as opposed to there's more linebackers do. But yeah, they don't have much. I mean, I think even if you do bring Rodney back, I think it was clear this year that the best way to use him is not 100% of the snaps. I mean, he started playing better when he was getting 70, 75%. I don't think Epps is, I think I like Epps, but I don't think he's a starter or at least I just don't see him being that caliber player. I think he's more of a sub package guy. So it's definitely a big need. It's really it's as big a need maybe not as receiver, but as it's close. Especially if Rodney doesn't come back, now you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So, who's any names jump out at you at safety?
Yeah, this is a position where I feel like the crop is better than like at edge, really. There's some names here. Marcus Williams from the Saints, and he's 25. It's, you can, these guys are normally expensive, but they're the type of free agents you want, ideally. You think back to when they signed Rodney the first time. I think he was 26 coming off the rookie deal. They signed Brandon Brooks that year too. Like those are the kind of signings you can build around. It's not just a 1-year signing. And Marcus Williams, to me, would fit that. There are some other ones. Justin Reed from Houston is another younger player who's going to be a free agent. So there are guys at this position you look at it and say, they can sign this guy, but also they can really build around him too. They don't have to just have a stopgap player. And that's ideal to me.
I mean, Howie dreams about 25-year-old unrestricted free agents. I mean, he talks about it every year when we talk to him in the spring. That's his ideal, to have that guy who's still going to be in his 20s when that contract ends, that first big, free agency contract the guy gets. So yeah, Marcus Williams is certainly right up Howie's alley, I would say. And they've had good luck getting safeties from the Saints anyway.
It worked out one time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually, when he's done here, he can go back
Finish his career there. That's my thinking on safety. I think there are definitely. I'm looking at the list, and look, another. I don't think they would do it, but Tyrann Mathieu is available. I think he's going to end up back in Kansas City, but he's a playmaker. He's one, and this is just like a person. He's one of my favorite players in the league to watch.
Yeah,
which is why I'd selfishly like them to sign him just so I could watch him play.
Yeah, I think he'll be going back there. But it's a great name. I mean, if he hits the market, he'll be expensive as heck. But they're going to have the money to do some things to add a couple free agents and. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody's looked at what the rookie. I guess the rookie pool depends on where you pick. So I mean, they'll have more money in the rookie pool, but it still comes out of their what they have available under the cap, which that'll take a chunk out of, no doubt.
A big chunk. Over the Cap did a good job. They list them with 21 million of projected cap space, but it's only about 12 to 13 million in, I forget what they're calling it, in what are they calling it here? In effective cap space, because a big chunk of that is going to be going to the first round pick because those guys get paid decent money as rookies and the cap hits are significant.
And that's if they use all 3 picks.
Which they won't, right? At least not at the positions they're slotted.
Right.
What percentage would you put it on? Howie drafting at 15, 16, and 19? I mean, there's no way, right?
I would say under 10%. That
he can't help himself.
Maybe 10% that he stays at all 3 picks. Because, I mean, there are players at those 3 spots that could help him. I mean, so on the one hand, yeah, but I mean, I think there's something to be said for turning one of those into a 1 and something else next year, or a 1 and something else this year. So there's that option. There's the option of moving up and moving down. I mean, what do you think's most likely if he does wheel and deal in the first round?
I don't know if there's a scenario that's more likely than the other. Really, that's a cop-out answer, but I think both options are very much on the table, moving up or down.
Or both. I mean, he's done both.
Oh, yeah, he could do both. Yeah. I'd be shocked if they sat there at 15, 16, and 19 and just took 3 players.
Yeah. No, I agree. Although it would be kind of cool to, I mean, to sit there and write 3 stories in like 20 minutes, like about, but yeah, one of these years, Howie's going to like trade out of like a certain pick, like trade out of 19, move up, get something, and end up back in the same spot with more picks. Like start at 19, go to like 12, go to like 23, and go back to 19 and have more other picks, like just and back with the same pick. So that's going to happen one of these years. He's really good. I mean, there's some things he's bad at, but draft day, I mean, he's really good at this stuff and maximizing, the chance of landing a player. And now
landing the player has proved a little more difficult at times.
Well, landing the player has worked out well, but landing the player has the people, man, my Twitter, I don't even know how it started. I mentioned Howie, and then Twitter just goes nuts. For days, people are screaming about Howie. And the thing about Howie is, like, there's no way to, like, his misses have been so bad. I mean, there's been some just spectacular misses, and we all know who they are. But like usually, if you miss on a guy, like, I mean, Derek Barnett's unusual miss because like he's just a disappointing player, but he was here his whole contract. He was a functional starter, but like most of his misses are, I mean, the Marcus Smiths and the Fireman Danny's and Rager. I mean, they're just like, I don't know, say useless.
Like laughing stock misses.
Yeah, laughing stock misses. We can go LSMs, and so
they lead the league in LSMs.
Well, I don't know if they do. I mean,
they don't.
They really don't. But then you start looking at like the things he's good at, like the later rounds and the trades and contracts. I mean, and people on my Twitter are like, well, you can't give him credit for Mulata. I'm like, well, why not? Like, oh, he doesn't get credit for Devontae. Like anybody could have picked him. Well, he picked him. Like you can't you can't pick and choose who he gets credit for. I got a guy trying to say he doesn't get credit for Mulata because it was obvious that people will do anything to rip on Howie, but the reality is it's a really complicated body of work to evaluate because there's been some, I mean, the creativity he uses has been, incredible, finding guys in the late rounds and undrafted and off other rosters and, but then you have these spectacular misses. You can't just, there's no simple, easy way to evaluate him. And so people are like, well, he's the worst general manager ever. Well, he's not, or he's a genius. Well, he certainly had some crazy misses. So it's just, since there's no easy way to do it, it just goes on forever, kind of like I am right now.
The thing I appreciate about him is how bold he is, though, with these trades. Like, he wants something or he wants to move, he'll do it. and it's not always the right move, but I give him credit for that. And I think back to 16. I mean, it ended up not working out in the long term, but it worked out in the short term. You can argue. I don't think they won a Super Bowl without him. So
yeah, I would say it worked out. I mean, yeah,
but just not even the outcome, but the thought process to do it. Even if you disagreed with it at the time or you still disagree with it, the boldness is impressive to me.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, he's got that chess mindset of being able to see a lot of different things and put them all together and make it work. And that's valuable. There's no doubt. I mean, draft weekend is really fun, because you just never know what, they put on the big screen, the Eagles have traded this pick. Nobody's ever surprised. It's like, okay, all right.
Yeah. And a lot of these trades, they start talking about them in Indianapolis, which is where I'll be next week for the Combine. Let's talk about it a little bit.
That probably wasn't your best segue ever, but, I'll take it.
I thought it was pretty good.
You tried.
Yeah. When you think of the Combine, is there anything that stands out to you from covering that event?
I really enjoyed covering the Combine, and not so much for, the player, the workouts or any of that, but just because it was always a good chance to see people that you don't really get to see too much. And I remember we were all walking to lunch, like 15 of the Eagles beat writers with Derek Boyko, the old PR guy, and John Harbaugh was walking down the street. And this is in 2013. This is right after he won the Super Bowl. And Harbaugh was just walking down the street by himself. Not one person recognized him. As far as non-football people, the football people knew who he was, but he's just walking down the street and he's like, "Hey guys," we're like, "Congratulations, on the Super Bowl." "Oh, thanks." Yeah, it was just like such a random thing. But my favorite memory of the Combine is, remember Will Rackley from Lehigh, the offensive lineman. Will Rackley, I think he ended up being a third-round pick of the Jaguars. Will Rackley went to Lehigh. And when we were talking to him, he was talking about how he was like a photography major, and his senior project was photographing the steel mills. They also work security at Eagles practice, which is interesting. But and he said Juan Castillo would always work with him and help him out and stuff, which is really cool. But Will Rackley's senior photography project was shooting this old steel mills, and there's now like a casino there and stuff like that. But they're incredible structures. And I've always been, when we would go up there, I was mesmerized by the old steel mills, just the scale of them. And his project was to kind of photograph them and capture the grand scale of them. And he gave me the link to his senior project, and the photos were incredible. So I thought, I have a really good story here on this prospect. He's a legit prospect. He ended up being a third-round pick and photographing steel mills. And so I put in a call to his photography professor. This is like a Dave Zangaro move right there, right? Put in the call to his photo professor. I talked to his coach, and I talked to the kid after his presser. I talked to him off the podium for a while. I had everything I needed. I just needed to talk to his photo professor. The dude refused to call me back. And I gave him 3 days. I must have called him 6 times, and he never called me back. And I'm still pissed at that guy. And then a week after the Combine, I get a call yeah, this is Will Rackley's photo professor. I'm like, dude, the story ran a week ago. And he was he was too important for me, all that kind of stuff. So so I don't know. I just look back, and every time I hear Will Rackley's name, I think I did do the story, but it would have been better with the professor's insight into it. But he was a pretty good photographer. I think his NFL career only lasted a couple of years, so hopefully he's making a living out of taking pictures.
There you go. I like that. You should have shown up at the school, press pass in hand, knock on the professor's door.
Well, I mean, I was in Indianapolis, so it
would have been tough.
I couldn't have done that, but and it just struck me funny is that I would say like 80-90% of the people we call you back, whether, you call former players and former coaches. And, it's part of our job. We call these guys and they call us back. And, if I need to reach Nick Sirianni, I can get him on the phone. But this photography professor wouldn't call me back. It's like, I mean, yeah, that just struck me as it was the same. It was the same year I spent like 2 hours in Andy Reid's hotel room. I'm like, I can hang out in Andy Reid's hotel room for 2 hours. I can't get a photo professor from frickin' Lehigh to call me. Still pisses me off.
I like that. My favorite combine memory was a very public one, but do you remember when the Eagles had the coin toss against the Colts?
Yeah.
Back in what was that 2017? It ended up being the Derek Barnett pick, but they had to flip a coin and they did it. It was hilarious the way they did it. The NFL realized how silly it was, but they leaned into it, which I appreciated. And they had both GMs on the stage. It was Howie and what was it? The Colts? It was the Colts. It was Chris Ballard. And they flipped the coin. The Eagles win. Howie gives like a fist pump and then like celebrates with Doug Pederson. It was really funny. It was a funny moment. And the Eagles took it was actually the Vikings pick because that was a Sam Bradford trade pick. They ended up using it for Barnett, and the Colts took Malik Hooker with the next pick, who, a lot of injuries in his career. But I remember that being really funny. And my other combine memory was I want to be really vague here. I don't want to give anything away, but I was trying to nail down a story several years ago, and I was kind of stalking someone to get an answer, and I couldn't find them. I was waiting where I thought they'd be. I waited for like a couple hours, and I'm like, this person's not returning my calls. They're not where I think they're going to be. Forget it. I'm going to breakfast. So I go to Cafe Patachu, which is my favorite restaurant in Indy. I sit down. They seat me right next to the guy I needed to talk to. I was like, here we go. And I was able to get the story. But it was a good lesson of like, when it's not working, just give up and go get breakfast.
That's a good one. Yeah. There you go.
So, Rube, as we look ahead to this year's combine, are there some things that you're kind of thinking about and storylines that the Eagles fans should be keeping an eye on?
Well, the first thing, and it's not Eagles specific, is the players. I think, what is it, 150, 155 players are threatening to not do any of the drills and interviews because the league wants to try to put a bubble in, which would keep them from meeting with their personal trainers and their team, their agents, and that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And hopefully they get that resolved. Considering where we are with COVID right now, we're kind of in a down time between between hot, whatever peaks. I don't really get what the league is trying to do, but hopefully that's resolved. I think there's a lot of agents and a lot of people in the league that think the combine is antiquated and has run its course, and that there's a lot more value in pro days. The players get to control everything in their pro days, where the league gets to control everything. And but I don't know. Do you think there's still value in the way they do it? I think the most value is in the teams meeting with the players, the interviews. I don't know.
Teams still find a ton of value in it.
Yeah. I just don't know if players now are so trained to do well in the drills. From the time they're done playing in college till the combine, they're basically training for the combine. They're not training to be football players. So you end up with, workout warriors and guys who have mastered the art of the, 2-cone drill or whatever it is. But that doesn't measure them as football players. So I don't know. I'm sure there's still value in it, but I know there's a lot of agents who think it's kind of run its course.
I really don't. I think it's very valuable because it puts them on a level playing field. The pro days, you get some wacky numbers out of those pro days.
Like Jalen Rager's 40 time.
Like Jalen Rager's everything from that pro day.
Did he run
And
like a 3.8 at his pro day?
But it's a chance to really see them all back to back to back to back, and it does put them in a high pressure situation. But playing football is a high pressure situation, so I like it. I think there is a lot of value in it, and then the meetings with teams are super valuable. And not to give another story about the guy in Indy, but that's where they spent so much time with him in Indianapolis back in 2016. It was intense. There was work with the coaching staff. He met with Jeff Lurie. They had him meet with a sports psychologist. They put in their work with him back then, and that's how they decided to draft him. So again, not looking at the outcome, looking at the process, it's important to these teams.
I would like to see. I wonder if that sports psychologist still has their notes. I'd like to see if there's any red flags in there. Yeah. No. There is value. There's definitely value. I wonder how long the emphasis will be on the drills. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how this gets resolved. And whether the league, it just seems an odd. You can't really create a bubble. These kids are staying in hotels, and I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you create a combine bubble. But you'd have to put fences up around all of downtown Indianapolis.
It's already all fenced in. Basically, it's all in that convention center.
Yeah, but they don't stay there. They leave and go to hotels and go out to dinner and see their family and see their agent. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully, you just love covering the combine so much. You just want to keep.
It's
going.
A long week.
It is. I did it. I probably covered like maybe 5 combines, and I never saw one nice day in Indianapolis. There's been some hailstorms and craziness, but I do like Indianapolis more than you do. I think you're not a big Indy fan, are you?
No.
Yeah, I don't mind Indianapolis. I like the canal trail that they built through the whole city. That's really neat. Yeah. They have nice murals. You're a mural guy. Have you walked there or jogged on that canal trail?
I've been there.
It's beautiful, man. It goes actually. The end of it is right at the NCAA headquarters.
Yeah,
and it's right where Indiana. What's that university? Indianapolis University at something or other. But it's where the 1988 Olympic trials were. Is right at the end of that trail. The track. It's where Flojo set the world record, the disputed world record, in the 100.
Why was it disputed?
Well, because it was a windy day and it was her race was wind aided, but the wind gauge mysteriously was listed as 0 wind, and she ran like 10:49, which blew away the world record. It should have been wind aided, but it wasn't. There's still an asterisk next to it in the list of world records, and then she mysteriously retired. But whatever. I don't want to go too far off topic, but I do like Indianapolis. There's a nice zoo there. You ever been to the zoo?
No.
There's a minor league stadium there right by the Colts Stadium. It's a nice place. Went to a game there once. Got the canal trail, some good restaurants. It's good downtown. I spent 10 days in Indianapolis for the Olympic trials in '88. I covered Carl Lewis and those, a lot of those guys for the Burlington County Times. Had a great time.
Indianapolis is just a giant convention center with the same restaurant like 20 times.
The same restaurant?
It's like the same restaurant. Steakhouse.
It's not a bad thing. Now you're anti-steakhouse.
I'm not going to rail against Indianapolis anymore. I'm trying to be
I don't
Nice,
know.
Indy.
The convention bureau is going to see this podcast and they're going to like,
They're going to kick me out of town the second
we're
I get
not going
there.
to let you off the plane.
Let's move on. Doug Pederson finalized his staff in Jacksonville. A lot of familiar names, which isn't a surprise.
Yeah.
But mostly on offense, which isn't a surprise either.
Yeah, and some of the names are really, really out of his long ago past. I'll go through the names here. I think he's got 8 former Eagles coaches on his staff in Jacksonville, including obviously Mike Caldwell and Press Taylor's coordinators. And he'd also already added Jim Bob Cooter as passing game coordinator, but he added 5 more. We can go through the names real quick. Andrew Briner. Well, I'll go through the names. You give me a reaction.
Okay.
Andrew Briner
was considered an up and comer not that long ago. I mean, when the Eagles hired him, it was like they hired him and Rich
Scangarello. Yeah.
Scangarello. Yeah, they hired both of them together as kind of the innovative new voices for the offense. It didn't really work out that way, but Briner, people liked him when they hired him, and the Eagles front office liked him too.
Yeah, I don't think we ever talked to him, did we?
No,
he never did. Never
not publicly. Yeah,
never talked to the media while he was here. But yeah, that was the year Doug had like 30 different offensive coaches who all had different titles, and we had no idea. Then they brought Marty in. Like, we just had no idea what anyone was doing, and I think they didn't really have any idea either. Now, here's one out of the deep dark past: Rory Segrist. Dave,
where was Rory?
Rory was at
New Mexico or something.
No, he had been at 3 schools since. Oh shoot, where was Rory? Okay, so he was at Florida International. No, I'm sorry, that was Briner. He was at Samford, Arkansas, and most recently Louisiana Lafayette.
He was at Samford.
Yeah, that's where he went initially after leaving the Eagles, after Andy fired him after the 2010 season.
So here's another connection. I think one of Doug's sons went to Samford and might have played under Rory.
You're right.
And another former Eagles assistant, Spencer Phillips, who was the assistant quarterbacks coach, came from Samford as well.
So if Doug's son went there, we're talking about Samford and Sons. Apologize for that. That's like the first joke of mine Dave's ever laughed at. But Rory Segrist was kind of, I mean, he was the special teams coach after Harbaugh. And he was actually the quality control special teams guy under Harbaugh. And his first game as special teams coach was that Packers game when the Eagles didn't have a punt returner, and they put who do they put out there? Somebody, J.R. Reed, who hadn't taken any reps all year, and he fumbled. He fumbled one like at the 3-yard line, and actually a linebacker. Who's the linebacker who recovered it for a touchdown? He later played for the Eagles. Tracy Moore or something like that. Tracy something. But anyway, yeah, Rory. Yeah, good luck, Doug. Rory's a nice guy. And that same day that Andy fired Rory, he fired Bill Shuey, and Doug brought Bill Shuey in as well. And Bill Shuey's an interesting story. He was a marketing intern in training camp in 2000, and he's from Bethlehem, so he used to be at training camp, and he was like a training camp helper. So he was working for the marketing department at training camp in 2000. And then the next year he wanted to go into coaching, and Andy had him as like the gopher, like the guy just running to get coffee for the coaching staff or whatever. And he was a quality control guy for 5 years, Dave. I've never heard of that.
Wow.
5 years. Bill Shuey was a quality control guy. And eventually in '08, he became linebackers coach, replacing Sean McDermott, who became the secondary coach when Harbaugh left for the Ravens. So Shuey and Pederson, both these guys haven't been with Doug for 12 years. And Bill Shuey hasn't even been. I think Matt Nagy hired him. Matt was here when Shuey was here as well. So Matt Nagy hired him from, I think he was at Widener before that. So Bill Shuey back with Doug. And the other guys are, Luke Thompson, who was, I think he was assistant special teams coach here Doug's last 2 years. He coached with Dave Phipp like 25 years ago at Holy Cross. So he's been part of that connection for a long time. And the other guy was, I believe, Nick Williams.
Mm-hmm. He was Doug's assistant.
He was Doug's assistant. So Doug just likes having Nick Williams around. So that's eight former Eagles coaches now on Doug's staff.
Wow. And a former Eagles coach, Juan Castillo, ends up in Washington.
Yeah, and this is an interesting combine thing too. When all those assistants that Andy had, like that, became head coaches, from Spagnuolo and Shermer and Brad Childress and Harbaugh and McDermott, and they would all have a dinner every year at the combine. It would be like Andy's coaching tree dinner, which I thought was really cool. Ron Rivera obviously was one of them. And Ron's last year here, he was the first guy to leave. He was linebackers coach here, and I believe he became Bears defensive coordinator or Chargers. I forget which one he went to first. Chargers, and his last year here was 2003. So he hasn't worked with Juan Castillo in 19 years. But you just think about the relationships that these guys build up working together, and they're all still hiring each other. And the funny thing is, Juan has worked for 5 head coaches in his career. He's been in the NFL since 1995 when Ray Rhodes hired him. And so the other coaches since then that he's worked under are Harbaugh, McDermott, Matt Nagy, and Ron Rivera. So it's like they're all former Andy Reid assistants, and they keep hiring Juan. And, Juan's coaching tight ends, which he hasn't done since 97 when he was here. He coached Chad Lewis and Jason Dunn and Jimmy Johnson, the other Jimmy Johnson. So Juan's a good football coach. And, there was a point where kind of before Andy made him defensive coordinator, there was a point where I thought Juan should get consideration as a offensive coordinator candidate. And I remember having long talks with Juan at Lehigh about how come offensive line coaches never get that opportunity. There's very, very few O-line coaches become coordinators. And he thought he was unfairly kind of typecast as an O-line coach. I think that's one of the reasons Andy might have given him that job, because he felt like he deserved a shot as a coordinator. It was probably on the wrong side of the ball. But Juan's a good football coach, and hopefully he does well with Ron Rivera in Washington.
Yeah, it's true. The offensive line coaches never seem to get promoted. I mean, I think about like head coaches, like there aren't many that have been O-line coaches, really, right?
No. And yeah, I can't think
Mike
of any.
Munchak.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah,
but there's not many.
I'm sure I'm missing some, but
you would think offensive line coaches are usually really cerebral and intelligent, and you have to know blitz pickups, you have to know the passing game, the running game. Offensive line coaches. There's no doubt in my mind Jeff Stoutland could call a game. If he was, he'd be a good
I think they're so hyper focused on technique.
I think that might be part of it. And a lot of times it's an older guy who's been around forever, and he's been an O-line coach forever. O-line coaches are like, they're just a different breed. They just love coaching O-line. So I think a lot of them just get classified that way. They can't do anything else, even though they can.
Yeah. All right. That's all we had on that. I'm back from my trip. This is the part where if you guys want to tune out, it'll hurt my feelings a little bit, but
All right. Thanks, Ben.
I'll let you do it. I had fun. I was in Joshua Tree in Death Valley for a week, and it was awesome. It was a ton of hiking and beautiful country out there.
Yeah, your photos were pretty amazing. So were you camping or staying in a hostel or a hotel? Or
No, I ended up just like doing little motels. I was gonna camp, but it became like too much of a hassle because I would have had to bring all my gear with me on a flight. And then the desert is a little tricky to camp because it's like during the day it gets up to like 75, and then at night it dips into the 30s. It snowed one night while I was out there, so I was happy I didn't camp. Next time, it would be fun to camp at those spots because some of the campgrounds are cool and it'd be easier to be in the park. But I'm glad I didn't on this trip.
What's the coolest thing you saw?
Death Valley was wild. It felt like I was on another planet. I mean, some of the the salt flats were incredible. Some of the canyons, like hiking up into canyons, and it was wild. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I like trips like that.
There was one photo you sent me that it looked like a giant crater from like a
it's that was actually the smaller one. There's a bigger one, but I couldn't even like get it in a frame of a single photo. It's called Yuba Bibi Crater, and that's Little Bibi, the one I sent you the photo of. But it's cool. It was not like it's a volcanic crater, but it wasn't an eruption. It was like, it like collapsed. That's how the crater was formed.
Have you ever been to that crater in Arizona? It's like in the north.
Meteor crater.
Yeah. Have you been up there?
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've never made it quite up there. Yeah. That's like the largest meteor crater in the world, right? I
don't know. It's huge though. It's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one was big, but I was able to walk around it.
Oh, really?
Like a mile and a half around it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there like a Chick-fil-A there or anything? Just in case.
In the crater?
Like by the crater, is there like a little?
Yeah, but I was there on a Sunday, so. All right, let's wrap it up on that. If you enjoyed the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. And if you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. We appreciate you guys being patient with us for these 2 weeks when we're going a little slow. Next week, we'll be back in full force, ready for free agency and the draft. That's it for Reuben. I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.